The village of Alverton had always been a place where wealth decided worth. Nestled between rolling hills and fertile lands, it thrived on trade, farming, and the powerful families who ruled from their manors. Life here was not harsh. There was plenty of food, festivals, and work, but the divide between the rich and the poor was so wide that they rarely crossed paths except in matters of duty. In the center of all this stood Liana, the mayor's only daughter, whose beauty and grace made her the dream of every ambitious man within 50 miles. Liana was unlike the other young women of her class, where most cared for gowns of velvet, pearls in their hair, and laughter echoing across marble halls. She preferred simpler pleasures. She would often sneak out during dawn, wrapped in a plain cloak, to walk along the meadows and watch the sun rise over the wheat fields. She would greet the farmers with a smile, ask about their families, and sometimes lend a hand carrying baskets of apples or weaving flowers into the hair of their children. These small acts made her beloved by the villagers, but also a mystery, because despite her wealth and status, she often looked distant, as though waiting for something she couldn't name. One by one, wealthy men tried to win her heart. The first was Lord Renfield, who arrived in a grand carriage drawn by 6 black horses, his coat embroidered with gold thread. He presented Liana with a gift, 2 Andalusian stallions, their coats shining like polished bronze under the sun. For a woman as rare as you, he declared proudly, only the finest horses in Europe would suffice. The villagers gasped at the sight, whispering that surely no woman could resist such a gift. But when Liana stroked the horses' manes, her face showed admiration, not joy. She thanked him kindly, but when asked if her heart was moved, she replied gently, "Horses can carry me across land, my lord, but they cannot carry me into happiness." Next came Duke Harland, a man twice her age but thrice as rich. He built an elaborate marble fountain in her honor in the town square. Water cascaded from statues of angels, and at night, lanterns made the fountain glow like starlight. The entire village celebrated the spectacle, believing Liana would surely accept him now. But when Harland asked for her hand, she only looked at the fountain sadly. "Stone and water can dazzle the eyes," she said, "but they cannot fill an empty heart." Baron Velasquez tried a different route. He filled ships with exotic spices, silks, and gems, and docked them in Alverton's port. For days the air smelled of cinnamon and cloves, and markets brimmed with treasures most villagers had never seen. But when he laid his riches before Liana, she shook her head. Spices flavor food, jewels sparkle in sunlight, but neither can give love meaning. 2 more suitors followed, each wealthier than the last. One promised her mansions in foreign lands, another offered titles that would make her name known throughout kingdoms. And yet, each time, she refused politely, her eyes growing heavier with disappointment. The villagers whispered among themselves, "Is she cursed, or too proud? How can she reject what others would give their lives for?" But Liana's heart longed for something she could not explain even to herself. She had seen how marriages among the rich often looked grand on the outside but hollow within. Husbands and wives who shared mansions but not laughter, wealth but not warmth. She wanted something else, something deeper, though she feared she might never find it. It was one quiet evening, as twilight painted the sky with shades of purple and rose, that her fate began to change. Liana had slipped away from the bustle of her household, wearing a simple cloak with the hood pulled low. She wandered to the old stone bridge that arched over the village river. The water shimmered with fading light, and willows leaned over, whispering secrets in the breeze. It was here that she heard it, the faint, haunting melody of a flute. The notes floated through the air like a voice calling her name. They were not polished or trained, but raw, full of aching beauty. The sound pulled her forward, across the bridge and down the grassy bank, until she saw him. A man sat by a small fire, his clothes threadbare, his boots patched with rough leather. His hair was dark and unkempt, his face lean with the look of someone who had traveled long roads with little rest. Yet there was something in his eyes, gentle, thoughtful, that made her pause. He held a simple wooden flute, carved by hand, and played with such emotion that it stirred something inside her chest. When he finished, he looked up, surprised to see her standing there. For a moment, neither spoke. The river murmured between them, and the fire crackled softly. "Why do you sit here playing to the night?" she asked finally, her voice carrying curiosity more than command. The stranger smiled faintly, though his eyes held a trace of sadness. Because music doesn't care if I am rich or poor. It comforts me when nothing else can. His answer startled her. It was so plain, so unguarded, unlike the rehearsed flattery of the lords. She stepped closer, lowering her hood. The firelight revealed her face, and the man's eyes widened with recognition. He had seen her from afar, the mayor's daughter who everyone spoke of. But he did not bow or stumble over compliments. Instead, he regarded her as one person regards another, equal and unpretentious. You play beautifully, she said softly. Not beautifully, he corrected. Honestly, the flute does not lie. If my heart is heavy, the sound is heavy. If I feel joy, it dances. Tonight, perhaps, it is somewhere in between. She sat on a stone nearby, her cloak cooling around her. And what makes your heart heavy? He hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. The road, the loneliness of it, and the memory of things I once had but lost. But also the hope of finding something, someone, that makes the road worth walking. For the first time in her life, Liana felt seen, not as the mayor's daughter, not as a prize, not as a jewel to be displayed, but as a person who understood the weight of longing. She looked at the stranger and wondered how someone with nothing could speak words richer than gold. They talked as the stars came out, their conversation flowing with ease. He told her his name was Elias, that he came from a distant village ruined by war, and that he had been wandering, doing small work where he could, trading music for bread or shelter. She listened with rapt attention, forgetting the time, forgetting the world beyond the riverbank. When at last she returned home that night, the villagers noticed something different in her face. Her eyes, once dimmed by disappointment, now held a quiet light. No jewels had been given, no treasures displayed, only words by a fire, and yet it was enough to awaken something within her. For days after, she found excuses to walk by the river again. And each time, Elias was there, either playing his flute or carving small figures from wood. Their conversations deepened, about dreams, fears, kindness, and the small joys that made life bearable. She began to laugh with him, freely, without restraint. And with every moment, she realized what she had been searching for all along. It was not wealth, nor titles, nor possessions. It was truth, kindness, and a heart that saw her not as an ornament, but as a woman longing for connection. The suitors would soon discover her secret, but for now, in the quiet by the river, she had found the beginning of what she thought might be happiness. The first whispers began the morning Liana was seen walking through the marketplace beside Elias. It was a sight so unexpected that many villagers dropped what they were doing just to stare. She, the mayor's daughter, usually passed through the square in a fine carriage or surrounded by attendants. But here she was, dressed plainly, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man whose boots were scuffed and whose coat bore more stitches than fabric. At first, people thought it was a mistake. Perhaps she was giving charity to the poor wanderer. But then Elias laughed at something she said, a warm, unguarded laugh, and she laughed back, tipping her head in a way that made the sunlight glint through her hair. It was not the laughter of formality, but of two friends sharing something secret. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes wide, and soon the gossip began to travel faster than the river's current. By the time the 5 wealthy suitors heard of it, outrage burned in their hearts. Each of them had spent fortunes to impress her, each humiliated by her refusal. To be replaced not by another lord or duke, but by a man who owned nothing, this was an insult they could hardly bear. Yet no matter how they scoffed, no matter how loudly they declared Elias unworthy, it did not change what everyone saw. Liana had never looked happier. Elias, for his part, did not seek attention. He kept living simply, repairing tools for farmers, mending fences, helping with harvests. Though he asked no reward, the villagers began to notice something rare in him. He gave his time and his hands as freely as he gave his music. When a widow's roof leaked during a storm, Elias climbed up without hesitation and patched it, even though rain drenched him to the bone. When a child dropped her toy in the mud, he carved her a new one from a scrap of wood. These acts cost nothing, yet they were worth more than jewels to those who received them. Liana watched all this with a heart that swelled with admiration. She had grown up surrounded by grand gestures, banquets, gifts, and festivals held in her honor. But never had she seen kindness so small and yet so powerful. Elias never boasted, never expected praise, yet he left people smiling wherever he went. That, she realized, was wealth of another kind. One evening, he gave her a gift. Not a necklace of pearls, nor a gown of silk. It was a wooden pendant, carved in the shape of a bird mid-flight. The wood was smooth beneath her fingers, its lines carefully etched, though not perfect. She looked at it, and then at him, and her eyes filled with tears. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetically. "But I made it with my own hands. Every line I carved while thinking of you." She fastened it around her neck with trembling fingers. "It is more precious than all the jewels I have been given. Because this carries not just beauty, but your heart." From that day forward, she wore the pendant openly, a quiet defiance to anyone who doubted her choice. The villagers noticed, and while some whispered disapproval, others began to marvel. The mayor's daughter, who could have had diamonds, chose wood. And yet, by the look on her face, she seemed richer than anyone. The wealthy suitors tried desperately to reclaim her attention. Lord Renfield rode by on his stallions, hoping she would change her mind. Duke Harland arranged another display in the square, fountains lit by hundreds of lanterns. Baron Velasquez even sent an envoy with an offer of entire estates should she reconsider. But when she walked past them with Elias at her side, laughing freely, their efforts looked pitiful in comparison. The breaking point came one afternoon when Elias was once again helping the widow with her cottage. The roof beams were heavy, and though the old woman protested, Liana insisted on climbing the ladder herself. She tied up her gown, rolled up her sleeves, and began to hammer alongside Elias, her delicate hands blistering against rough wood. The sight stunned the villagers who had gathered to watch. Never had they seen the mayor's daughter lift a tool, let alone sweat under the sun. Yet she did so with joy. Dust streaked her cheeks, her hair tumbled loose, but her laughter rang out as Elias steadied the beam and teased her gently about her crooked nails. And when at last the roof was mended, she looked at him with such unguarded affection that the entire crowd fell silent. For in that moment, they saw what the 5 wealthy men could not give her: partnership, simplicity, and true companionship. The suitors, humiliated, left the village one by one. Their riches, once dazzling, now seemed hollow in the face of something so pure. They muttered of foolishness, of wasted opportunities, but deep down they knew, they had lost not to wealth, but to sincerity. The mayor himself was torn. He had hoped for a marriage that would secure alliances, strengthen his family's name, perhaps even extend their lands. At first, he was furious when rumors reached his ears. "My daughter, tied to a man who has nothing. Do you want the people to laugh at us?" He scolded her. But when he saw her face, radiant, free of the sadness that had shadowed her for months, his anger faltered. "Father," she said softly, "all my life I have been offered everything except the one thing I desire most: to be truly happy. And with Elias, I am." The mayor searched her eyes and saw a conviction no argument could shake. He realized, perhaps too late, that wealth could not purchase what his daughter had found by chance. So though it pained him, he did not forbid her. For what father, seeing such happiness, could destroy it? And so it happened that the entire village bore witness to something extraordinary. Liana and Elias walked through Alverton not as a lady and her servant, but as equals, hand in hand. Children ran to greet them, elders nodded with approval, and slowly, even the skeptical came to accept it. Because they could not deny what they saw, she had chosen with her heart, and her heart was full. The day came when Elias, nervous but determined, stood before the villagers with nothing in his hands but his flute. He played a melody he had written for Liana, notes that spoke of his journey, his loneliness, and finally, his joy at finding her. The music rose into the evening air, raw and imperfect, yet so filled with love that it silenced everyone. Tears streamed down Liana's face, and when he finished, she embraced him before them all. And that night, as lanterns flickered in the square, the villagers whispered in awe. 5 rich men could not bring her joy. But a poor stranger, with nothing but his heart, has given her more than all of them combined. From then on, the tale of Liana and Elias spread beyond Alverton. Travelers carried it from town to town, the story of a woman who turned down wealth for love, and a stranger who proved that true riches are not measured in gold, but in the happiness 2 hearts can create together. And though the marble fountains crumbled with time, Though ships of spices and jewels sailed on to other ports, the memory of their laughter, their shared labors, and the wooden bird pendant around her neck lived on as legend.